Welcome everyone. Good afternoon to today's event. My name is Alexander Natz. I'm the Director General of EUCOP, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs based here in Brussels. It's a great pleasure to organize this event here today, this afternoon, and to have many of you participating in this event and really to have great panels lined up for this afternoon. Let me say, first of all, a big thank you to BPI, the German Pharmaceutical Industry Association, which is organizing this event together with us. And the topic of this event is the EU Beating Cancer Plan, which has been published in February 2021 as a key pillar of the European Health Union. We will support, it will support the member states in bringing innovative technologies, including diagnostics and therapies to cancer patients, and really providing equal access across the EU. And this is a big topic in the EU Beating Cancer Plan. There are other areas which are quite relevant for the pharmaceutical industry in particular. And one of those areas is the pharmaceutical legislation, the pharmaceutical strategy, which looks into innovation, but also into the availability of medicines and medical technologies, such as medical devices. We hope that by reforming our legislation in the pharmaceutical sector, we are strengthening incentives rather than shortening incentives. It's really important that we build on what we have seen in the rare disease policy in orphan drugs over the last 20 years, where we've seen an increase of those therapies to come to the market. So it's really important that we get this right. But it's also important to strengthen Europeans' competitiveness towards other parts of the world, such as the US, but increasingly as well Asia and in particular China. So it's really important that we bring innovation back to Europe, that we make sure that we get research is conducted in Europe, and that not just products are sold in Europe, reaching European patients. And last but not least, it's really also important that we're avoiding barriers to market for companies. We have seen many innovative products which have actually not reached the patients, also for reimbursement reasons. And this is really something we would like to stress. But looking now really to the EU Beating Cancer Plan in this event, it's a pleasure to welcome many MEPs and representatives of the European Commission here later on. And I would like to emphasize a couple of points which I think are relevant in the EU Beating Cancer Plan. It's only a couple of them. We had an event this morning about cancer registries. It's really important to interconnect, to make sure that cancer registries get connected across Europe. We are talking about an EU health data space, and I think especially when it comes to cancer registries, it's important that the European Commission is interconnecting member states' registries. The same holds true for European reference networks. We have seen with great interest, and we have applauded the fact that more European reference networks should be created in the field of cancer. It's really important that we make the best benefit of the existing European reference networks, but also to use the success that we have seen in rare disease reference networks, also in the field of oncology. And we will talk today about genomic data. It's really important that we are also here connecting the dots and that we're making sure that genomic data is better used. And the two panels today will be focusing on genomic data in the wider sense. On the one hand side, at diagnostics, advanced diagnostics, but also on the other hand side at personalized medicine. And last but not least, and there are just four of those areas which I've been choosing to emphasize. The focus on pediatrics and rare cancers is really critical, and the Commission has been, in our opinion, taking the right direction in addressing those types of cancers. Now, looking a bit more in detail, the EU network linking comprehensive cancer centers, which should be set up in 2025, aims to facilitate an uptake of high quality diagnosis and treatments by member states. So I think it's all about interconnecting, getting the experience from member states. And it's really not just about treatment options. It's also about diagnostics when we're talking about tackling cancer, preventing cancer, but also having the right diagnosis and choosing the right treatment option later on. So stronger emphasis on diagnosis is certainly critical. The second point I wanted to make is Europe will get more competitive, in our opinion, if we coordinate research, training, and clinical trials EU Commission and also the institutions have conducted the first step in that respect with the clinical trial regulation, and this is important to be continued. I mentioned before the launch of new reference networks for cancer conditions. We think that is critical because what we've seen in the past, the European Commission has played a major role and created the European reference network some 10 years ago, and it has been a success story. It has been very successful to make sure that there's knowledge transfer among the key experts in their field of areas in rare diseases. So to transpose that into further cancer conditions is a right way forward, such as the better use of genomics data, which will be discussed later on this afternoon. And one thing which we also would like to discuss, what role can industry play in those discussions? We hope that there is an open-minded network of comprehensive cancer centers, but also in the wider sense that industry can play a critical role in setting up the measures which are foreseen in the EU Beating Cancer Plan. I wanted to mention as well, finally, one point, the 2003 Council recommendation on cancer screening, which in 2022 should be extended to other screening areas in ovarian cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer, which is something which we appreciate very much. And last but not least, I would like to introduce the two key topics where we think that key innovative technologies can be transforming the future for cancer care. And the first one is advanced diagnostics. And for this, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Matthias, who is sitting next to me, who has been founding a group within EUCOB on advanced diagnostics, which has been very successful in pushing the research, but also the reimbursement agenda at the member states. So, Matthias, if you might want to say a few words on this.
Yes, thank you very much, Alexander. So within EUCOB, we have a couple of companies that are developing these diagnostic tests that are based on genomics. And they have found that even though we have this great potential in these tests and refer to them as advanced diagnostics because they're really based on the evolving understanding of genomics, and they concern not only clinical decision making but also decision making in research as well. We see that there are some barriers currently to adopting these technologies. So despite the great benefits that these diagnostics have and can deliver to patients and also to the healthcare systems themselves due to the vast amounts of relevant information they generate, there are currently a lot of barriers at member states level, and we hope that the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan will also help to tackle some of those challenges. For advanced diagnostics in particular, the way towards reimbursement is at the moment too long. It takes several years for an advanced diagnostic to become reimbursed, and then for patients to be able to access these technologies. And even though there are some initiatives at certain member states where they seek to support the increased uptake, currently funding is unfortunately insufficient. So this group has been set up to engage in dialogue with decision makers, both in member states and at the EU level, to see how we can tackle these challenges together and reap the benefits of advanced diagnostics. We will also be discussing personalized therapies today, Alexander. And I think these also, similar to advanced diagnostics, they have a great potential for leading to better therapeutic outcomes for cancer patients and also to less adverse events in the future. We will be discussing these together with what we term foundational therapies, which is basically chemotherapy, and together targeted therapies and foundational therapies, when used together with advanced diagnostics, can really help guide treatment decisions for patients. And I think the main challenge really for these key technologies is to ensure the adequate funding in the future.
Right, indeed. Thanks, Matthias. I mean, it's really great that we can focus on those areas in the conference today. So the advanced diagnostics and personalized medicines are critical. Personalized therapies, diagnostics will play a major role in this respect, and we really hope that we can get adequate funding. And this is one of the priorities of the group Matthias is running in EUCOB to ensure funding. And we know that the Commission is not in charge of funding, but having a positive climate for pricing and reimbursement for those type of therapies will play a major role. And with this, I would like to end our little introduction here. It's a pleasure to see many participants here. It's a pleasure to see many members of the European Parliament, many experts, and last but not least, also the European Commission represented here to discuss with us today. And we would like to introduce from the Parliament perspective with an introduction from Manfred Weber, the chairman of the EPP, the European People's Party, who will speak to us now. Thank you very much for being with us, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting event.
Dear members of the Bundesverband der Pharmazeutischen Industrie, dear members of EU COPE, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for me to speak to such a high-level audience of health experts. I'm so sorry I cannot attend this event in person, and I'm sure you will have interesting and fruitful discussions with my colleagues. With the Beating Cancer Plan, the European Union has shown it is determined to make a difference in the fight against cancer. You all know how much the European People's Party and I personally have fought for this plan during the last European election campaign, because we are convinced that if we bring all our resources, all our knowledge together, we can beat cancer. Now we need to bring the plan to life. And in this area, you will have to play a crucial role. Firstly, we need to bring all our experts together and share our data across Europe. Many small biotech companies doing cancer research, like the companies that developed the vaccine against COVID, are only be able to grow if they work in cooperation with universities, research centers, incubators, and public-private corporations. The story behind the coronavirus vaccine shows what Europeans can do when they work together. Therefore, what we need is to systematically remove obstacles for our doctors and researchers and to support joint research, especially for non-commercial clinical trials. Secondly, we need to invest massively in research and innovation. Prevention is crucial, but for most cancers, scientists still do not know the underlying causes. This is why we must invest in research to understand why cancers arise and to develop the best treatment. To do so, the European Union must continue investing in research and development. We also need to make sure that the proposals from the Horizon mission and Beating Cancer Plan, like Understanding Cancers, UNCAN, actually see the light. Thirdly, I'm convinced that the coronavirus pandemic and the lessons we learned from it can lead to a giant leap in telemedicine today. In the future, each European should be able to get the best treatment regardless of where she or he lives. We cannot allow that there would be first and second class Europeans in terms of access to cancer treatment, for example. And finally, let me underline one thing. Curing cancer can be the first crucial step to a greater plan. I'm convinced that building a European health union can become a new defining project of the European integration, one that will show European citizens the added value of being a European, of a Europe in their daily lives. I thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much indeed to the European Parliament and to Manfred Weber there for giving us his thoughts. As he said, we've learned a lot of lessons from the COVID pandemic, so I'm no doubt that we will be touching on those today. My name's Jennifer Baker. I am an EU policy journalist, and I will be your moderator for the two panels coming up today. We've got lots of interesting speakers for you to really try and tackle this topic. So also let me thank the welcoming speakers before I talk to you about our first panel, which is making advanced diagnostics available to EU cancer patients. Now that sounds like a very broad topic. We've a lot to get through in only 45 minutes, but of course I do want you, the audience, to be involved as well. And to do that, we're using the Slido tool. Now, if you want to use Slido, you can go to slido.com on your browser. You can scan the QR code, or you can insert the hashtag Cancer Conference EU, and that will take you straight to our first poll. You'll see there on the screen, you've got polls. And the question we're asking is, in which areas of cancer care do you think advanced diagnostics will have the greatest positive impact? Which area? And is it choosing the right clinical pathway for the patient? Is it providing information about treatment choices and families and carers? Is it about equipping healthcare systems and healthcare professionals with the right information for better decision making? Or is it directing future areas of research, including clinical trial design and the development of new therapies? Please do go over there to Slido and select one of those 4 options. We'll come back and take a look at that after we've heard from our panelists. Now, as I say, this is about making advanced diagnostics available to EU cancer patients. And joining us, as we mentioned, from the European Commission, from DG Sante, we're delighted to have Anna Eva Ampelas, who's the Head of Unit for Medical Devices and Health Technology Assessment. Thank you very much, Anna Eva. From the European Parliament, we are expecting to hear from Tomislav Sokol, who is a member of the MEPs Against Cancer group. He will be giving some intervention. We have also joining the panel, we have Europadonna President, Dr. Tanja Spanic. Benjamin Gannon is Head of International Access and Policy at Guardant Health, and Dr. Rosa Giuliani, Director of Public Policy at the European Society for Medical Oncology, will actually be doing double duty, joining us in both panels. So thank you very much, Rosa, for being here. Anna Eva, let me start with you. Give me your opening remarks, your opening thoughts on, you're right at the centre of this within the European Commission. What are the possibilities out there for the future?
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for inviting me to this very important and interesting event. As mentioned in the beginning, I am Head of Unit for the unit in DG Sante dealing with medical devices and health technology assessments. And I'm very excited to be here because I think that both those areas are very relevant for the discussion that we are having today. Both those areas, depending on what we are doing in them, they can really have an impact on the availability of diagnostics to EU cancer patients. In addition, as you know, cancer and the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan is a very important priority for the Commission, and it's a key pillar for the European Health Union. I will focus, as I mentioned, on medical devices and HTA, but I would like to mention as well that the Commission is doing a lot of other activities with direct impact on what we are discussing here today. The pharma strategy was also already mentioned, the same as the European Health Data Space, the reference network, and also broader research activities. But starting from the medical devices. The EU medical devices legislation regulates a very broad range of devices which are relevant for cancer patients. We are talking both about in vitro diagnostics that analyze the specimens and medical devices that come into direct contact with the patient. And just to give you a few examples, we have the genetic tests to test predisposition to cancer, cytology screening, diagnosis tests, companion diagnostics to choose the most appropriate treatment, and tests to measure the response to treatment. Then, of course, there are also many other non-cancer specific diagnostics which are critical also for cancer patients. How do we regulate those devices, and what is new in this respect? Well, we have a new regulatory framework for medical devices in place, consisting of the 2 main regulations, the medical devices regulations and the in vitro diagnostic medical device regulation, IVDR. Those new acts are replacing more than 20 years old directives. And as you might know, the medical devices regulation is applicable since May this year, and IVDR is scheduled to come into application from May next year. I would like to mention a few aspects that are important in this new regulatory framework, which I think could have a direct impact on patients' availability to safe and performance devices. First of all, the regulatory landscape is introducing a new classification system with a conformity assessment process that depends now on the risk classes. We know that many of the cancer diagnostics would be placed in class C in this system. This is the second highest risk class, and therefore they will be under scrutinized or oversight of the notified bodies who will verify the safety and the performance independent of the manufacturers. This is likely to increase the safety. We have for the companion diagnostics, the notified body is also obliged to consult the Authority for Medicinal Product, which creates a more interplay between the medical devices and the pharma sector. And we have also a new set of rules on in-house devices, which are made and used in the same health institution. In addition to this, the new framework is also enhancing the traceability of devices and the transparency, and it's also increasing the coordination. For example, for high-risk devices, which often includes the cancer diagnostics, the manufacturers must make available a summary of safety and performance of the device, and this should also be written in a way that is clear to the intended user. In addition to this, the legislation introduces a possibility to have a coordinated application for clinical investigations in different countries, and it also reinforces the coordination when it comes to vigilance and market surveillance activities. What are then the main challenges with all this? Why? Well, the new regulation on medical devices is very essential and very welcome. It's a very important piece of legislation. But the COVID-19 pandemic has brought enormous challenges to the IVD sector. This has prevented stakeholders from fully implementing the new legislation in time. As I mentioned, the date of application is on the 26th of May next year. Many stakeholder associations, as well as the Council and the Parliament, have expressed their concerns on this, and particularly in relation to the low or limited notified body capacity, which is likely to create bottlenecks and prevent IVDs from remaining or being placed on the market. So in order to address these concerns and to ensure a continuous availability of devices, the Commission is currently working on a legal proposal with the aim to make the transition from the directives to the new IVDR a bit smoother, but without compromising patient safety. This proposal should be adopted still this month, but to come into force, it needs to be adopted by Parliament, by the European Parliament and the Council. I think it is important, however, to say that this legislative action alone will not solve the challenges of the sector. We, in the Commission, we are already working on, together with national competent authorities, to identify further actions that can support the preparedness of the sector. And I think we need to be aware that all the actors would need to work very closely together to make sure that we get ready and that we can strengthen the system. Then turning to the health technology assessment, we are very happy from the Commission side that the Council and the European Parliament has finally agreed after very long negotiations and reached an agreement on the new HTA regulation. This is expected to be formally adopted towards the end of the year. And we believe that this new regulation also can contribute to speeding up access to innovative cancer diagnostics to EU patients. The framework to be set up under the HTA regulation will provide member states with high quality and timely HTA reports. It will also enable them to share resources, expertise, and capacity. Cancer medicines are very much in focus of this new regulation. It will be the first medicine subject to the joint clinical assessments in this progressive rollout that has been agreed by the Council and the Parliament. In addition to the joint clinical assessments, this regulation will also provide for scientific advice to developers of innovative cancer medicines by HTA bodies, and this can happen in parallel with the European Medicines Agency's advice, and it also provides the possibility for more structured horizon scanning. The HTA regulation will involve more patients, so it will be more patient-oriented and allow for a more transparent approach than we have in the current system. I think it's also important to say that the joint work that will be set up under the HTA regulation will not start from scratch, but it will build upon experience that have been done by the current project-based work in UNETA 3, where cancer has been one of the main priorities, with many joint assessments carried out on oncology products. So finally, we believe that both the new medical devices legal framework and the new HTA regulation will play a very important role in facilitating the availability of safe and performant cancer treatments to EU patients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna-Eva. Now, as I said, we have our representative from the MEPs Against Cancer, Tomislav Sokol. Thank you very much for being with us today. Give me your intervention. I know you've got many thoughts on this and have been working very hard on this issue.
Thank you, Jennifer, very much. And thank you also for allowing me to be part of this today, because I think this is also very timely and very interesting and important public health topic. Of course, we know that everybody is focused now when discussing health issues on European level. Everybody is focused on COVID-19, but we should not neglect other things, that we should use this kind of policy prioritizing of healthcare and public prioritizing of healthcare to also speak about other issues as well. And of course, one of these issues is cancer and availability of diagnostics and treatments of cancer. You know that we are currently working on the draft report on Europe's beating cancer plan in the BECA committee in the Parliament. So a lot of these issues that we are discussing today will also be mentioned in that report, where we have a lot of amendments, and now we are getting into the political discussions about how to find a compromise and common solutions. So when we discuss this issue, it has already been said. So two important legal developments. So the medical devices legislation, which is very important, of course, in terms of increasing patient safety, which is the primary number one concern, which needs to be fully implemented by the member states. And the other is the HTA, on which finally, several months ago, a political agreement has been reached, which was, that this was a big problem, not in the Parliament, but in the Council between the member states. But thankfully, they reached an agreement on that. But unfortunately, as with all agreements on the European level, it's always a kind of a compromise which leaves a lot to be desired. And this is the same with HTA regulation, because it is a step in the right direction, but I believe it does not go far enough. Because when you speak of health technology assessment, one of the most important issues, which in the end determine whether something will be funded or not, is the cost effectiveness analysis. And this is really not mandatory part of the common HTA on the European level. And this is a big problem, because in the end, the member states' national healthcare systems define whether they will fund something or not, and this is the prime. And if you want to make something accessible for patients, this is the primary concern. This is the priority. This is the primary concern that they have, because if national health insurance institutions do not fund something, then most of the patients who cannot pay for it by themselves will be left without this. So this is a big problem. And connected to this, when we speak of the criteria on whether member states put something into the national health insurance packages, of course, they have the autonomy to define this by themselves, but their criteria needs to be objective, non-discriminatory, and procedure needs to be transparent. And we have EU legislation on this, but this legislation is 32 years old. This is the so-called Transparency Directive from 1989, which has never been amended. So this is a very rare piece of EU legislation which has never been amended, and this is a big problem. I know that there are big political concerns, that there are many member states who do not want to go in this direction, who blocked any initiative on this. But this is definitely a big problem, because the directive as it is today is just not well equipped to really make sure that all the criteria on introduction of new medicines, of new devices into national health insurance packages are really transparent and objective enough. So this was about that. Of course, there are also other things relating to access to top diagnostics and healthcare which need to be discussed. And of course, one of the major issues are the big differences that exist between different member states. So in some member states you have 50 or 60% bigger chance of dying from cancer once it has been diagnosed than in some other member states. For instance, men in Croatia have almost 2 times bigger chances of dying from certain types of cancer than people in the Western Europe. So this is something which is definitely unfeasible, which cannot be maintained in the long run. If you want to speak about European Health Union, and if you want to speak about European citizenship, social citizenship, and of having all citizens equal in the European Union. So this is something that needs to be addressed. what do we have to do? So first, we need to invest more. We need to invest more into health infrastructure, into health workforce. Of course, we have the EU for Health program, but we also have cohesion policy, which has much bigger financial potential than the EU for Health program, which can be used to relieve these differences that exist today. Because differences in access to healthcare, to diagnostics and treatment, also directly are connected with differences in health outcomes. And this is something that EU can really do a lot to resolve. Also, there is the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive. The Cross-Border Healthcare Directive gives patients the right to access best possible healthcare in the EU if they cannot get adequate treatment at home in their own country. But unfortunately, first, patients do not know about this right, and there is no obligation for member states to promote these possibilities. So member states only have to provide most basic information, which is usually not enough. And there are still big legal, administrative, bureaucratic obstacles for patients to access healthcare abroad. And one of the most important issues is the fact that we still have two pieces of EU legislation which regulate the same thing. So so we have the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive and Social Security Coordination Regulation. So all of this is so complicated that even health lawyers cannot find a way within this labyrinth of different legal rules, conditions, etc. So this is something that needs to be resolved. The legal framework needs to become much more simplified, much more transparent. All the obstacles for patients should be removed, especially the necessity for them to pay upfront for the treatment and then ask for reimbursement afterwards. And of course, all of the unnecessary requirements which are present in the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive need to be removed as well. So I know that the Commission is currently working on the revision of the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive, on the public consultation and analysis, and I believe that some result will come out of this. And my last point, which I think is also very important, is the problem of data. So if we want to have new treatments, new diagnostics, new devices, etc., we need to have clinical trials which will back up and be the basis for their introduction into national healthcare systems. But these clinical trials, especially cross-border clinical trials, face big obstacles, especially for small member states. And one of the biggest obstacles is the lack of interoperability of data. So we have different protocols, different standards, different rules in different member states on the use of data. We have different technical standards for the use of data. We have different interpretations of the GDPR in different member states, which directly influence the collection of data, and this is a big problem which also needs to be remedied. I'm especially eager and looking forward to the new regulation, the proposal new regulation of European health data space, which should ensure the interoperability of data, because if you want to have a common European health union, if you want to have some kind of a common European healthcare system, more or less, to have this cross-border exchange of data, use of European reference networks, cross-border clinical trials, etc., then we need to have this health data space, we need to have this clear set of rules, and we need to have this interoperability of data between different member states. So I think that there's some other things that I would like to mention, but I believe that we don't have the time. I believe that what I would like to say in the end is the fact that healthcare is now the policy priority of the European Union, is in the public spotlight, and we should use this and make sure that all of the EU legal instruments and financial instruments, which we already have at our disposal, to really resolve the problems that we are facing today, especially in terms of access to modern diagnostics and treatment, which is of primary concern of us. And what is important, my last message is that we do not have to change the treaties and give more powers to the EU to do this. We have a lot of existing legislation which needs to be amended. We have a lot of legal bases which can be used for future legislation on this. So we just need to get to work and find the political will to do this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Tomislav, for joining us as always. So now we have heard from the position of the Commission, we've heard from the Parliament, but before we hear from our remaining speakers, please let me remind you to go to Slido. Do use that Slido poll. I think we can get the QR code up on screen as well that you can scan. So if you go to slido.com or scan that QR code, you'll be able to access to that tool. You can also use Cancer Conference EU if you want to put it in manually. And please do answer our poll questions. And we also have open now the Q&A function as well. If you want to put questions to our panelists, time allowing, because I know we are very short on time. With that, Tanya, let me hand the floor over to you.
Hello, and first of all, thank you for this invitation and for the opportunity to give you also the patient's perspective. We are very happy that European Beating Cancer Plan is moving forward and that we are kind of part of this procedure all the time. So how are patients actually informed or aware of new developments and recent diagnostics is very recent diagnostics procedures is very diverse across the Europe. Even though we think that maybe in European Union patients have equal access, this is not the case. We heard already a few times this today, but we've also done a survey in Europadonna last year in September and asked our member countries what is the situation in their country. And we saw a big diversity, even if in more developed country, if we consider that like Western or Northern countries, this kind of new, especially genomic and genetic tests for cancer, especially for breast cancer patients, are not available or are not reimbursed, but the patient should pay them out of their pockets, which we think it's really not appropriate, and everybody should have the same access to this kind of the treatment, the diagnostic and treatment procedures. We try to educate them, to share new informations with them through all our channels and at our educational meetings, at conferences and advocacy trainings, to at least educate our member countries, our national delegates, to share this information with their members, because we want to spread this information to reach every single patient. We know that this is probably impossible and this could happen only in a very ideal world, but we are trying to do this. So as I already mentioned, one of the problems and the biggest barrier is of course reimbursement and to access to this kind of diagnostics. And of course, if this would be in European Beating Cancer Plan as a suggestion and as an obligation, this would be also easier for our country delegates to lobby and to ask their national authorities to put this diagnostic procedures on their reimbursement lists. But not just the new technologies, so we can see also diversities in already very established diagnostic procedures. We heard already today with pathology and histology results. So cancer cannot be diagnosed only with one diagnostic technique. It should have all different comprehensive diagnostic techniques available to give a really appropriate and exact diagnosis. So the treatment can be more and more personalized, and to every single person, every single patient, because just the right treatment can bring better outcomes. So we want to have right treatment at the right time and accessible as soon as possible. If we talk more about the elevation methods and health technology assessments, we are well aware that this is very diverse across the Europe. We just heard now how European Union and European Parliament is putting a lot of effort into this and what big efforts, benefits this can bring to patients. But we still see, I have to point this out again, a lot of diversities. I may consider myself lucky that I live in Slovenia and that we have already both genetic and genomic testings for cancer patients available. But if I just look across the border to my neighbor countries, I can see that my friends and my breast cancer colleagues don't have the same opportunity. And probably inside the European Union, nowadays, this is almost impossible. We heard today also about COVID pandemics, and we all are well aware how screening programs were stopped during this pandemic lockdowns, and also some cancer treatments. But at this point, I would like to address that not just pandemic, also a cancer epidemic is among us, and that we should not neglect this problem in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. I think getting very much to the heart of the topic of this panel, the difficulties and the disparities between different EU member states. Benjamin, let me turn to you and get your thoughts and your perspectives on what, even your reflection on what you've heard other panelists mention.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to the organisers for having inviting us and having us here. Guardant Health is one of the companies involved in the UCOPE Advanced Diagnostics Initiative, US company, which is heavily involved in bringing liquid biopsy molecular diagnostics to patients in healthcare systems globally. And the company's been in has been in operation since 2012. But more recently, we've begun the global rollout of the global expansion, and are more present in Europe. I think what struck me from the very opening remarks from Alexander Natz were his comments around experience working in the rare diseases environment. And I think if I think about the current situation coming out of the pandemic, if I think about the current situation in advanced diagnostics, and the genomics working group is primarily only focused in molecular diagnostics, so we're not talking here about imaging or other modalities. But what I found is that it is really important to get clarity on definitions, as it's a very, very complex environment. We've talked here about advanced diagnostics being the gatekeepers of personalized or precision medicine. They can do lots of different things. And when we engage with decision makers, it's imperative on us, and I think jointly, to ensure that we're talking about the same thing. So are we talking here about a genetic test working to understand risk of being diagnosed or being diagnosed with a condition, or are we talking about a prognostic type of assay which assists with understanding how a patient will respond to a treatment or chemotherapy, or are we talking about a companion diagnostic which assists in therapy selection? And I've been involved in the sector now for a number of years, coming from the pharmaceutical sector, and in all of our engagements, it's very important that we're very clear in terms of the type of technology that we're talking about. I think the other thing that is imperative here is I guess the community to understand the innovation life cycles. The innovation life cycles in this space are not like in the pharmaceutical sector. They're a lot faster. There's a lot more iteration. And so just to give you an idea of when we talk about an advanced diagnostic, the paradigm in, for example, treating late stage lung cancer or late stage breast cancer, just even a few months or even 2 or 3 years ago with a targeted therapy, was based on an understanding of a handful of mutations, less than 5, less than 4. Whereas now, as understanding is developing, we have diagnostic technologies which are available, which can sequence and which can read multiple mutations across multiple indications at one point in time. So there's a high degree of complexity, and innovation life cycles are very fast. So what does that mean then in the context of the regulatory evaluations? What does it mean then in the context of the reimbursement or the evaluations for value that reimbursement authorities and HTA groups and bodies need to understand? Is that the evidentiary hurdles, which are fit for purpose, and which are kind of well known and well recognized, even though they're a constant state of reform for pharmaceutical products, are not necessarily fit for purpose in the in the diagnostic space. And some really stark examples of that are in the area of breast prognostic testing, where highly validated tests from many different suppliers with randomized control prospective data over a number of years have been available, and yet in many countries in Europe, even though those tests are deemed to be cost effective in different jurisdictions, are still not available. And that really is not acceptable, because the reimbursement authorities are holding the evidentiary hurdles to a level which is not commensurate with the type of evidence. And just coming full circle to the experience of the rare diseases sector, I think where this community has come together to discuss the flexibilities which are required or potentially needed by decision makers when they're appraising values are quite recognized, either in the areas of incentives, to support introduction of these products, incentives in terms of and flexibilities in particular when it comes to the data needs and funding and reimbursement needs. So concepts like coverage with evidence development, allowing a diagnostic technology into a pilot program in a country to generate evidence whilst it receives some degree of funding. These types of ideas, I think, would be very interesting to develop together with the community. So they're my initial reflections.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Really useful insight there for our conversation. Rosa, let me hand over to you. You have a tricky job not repeating yourself, but let's focus a little bit on the question of this panel, which is about getting it available to all EU cancer patients and making advanced diagnostics possible. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, actually, I could be really brief because I can say I agree with Tanya, I agree with Benjamin, I agree with Anna, and the job is done. But just let me say a few words for those of you who are not familiar with the ESMO, the European Society for Medical Oncology, is a society that represents over 25,000 members. Majority of them are in the European regional area, but almost half, 45%, are spread around the world from over 160 countries. This is to say that the discussion at the level of the oncology community is a discussion that has some, it's really interesting to have the discussion at national level and then at supranational level, for instance, in the European area, but then it should be like enlarged to a global discussion because cancer is a problem all over the world. I know that we need to proceed step by step, but we should keep also this in mind because I think that now we have in the European Union an excellent opportunity to develop a system that actually may work to improve patient outcomes. So we have such interesting time with the Europe Beating Cancer Plan, the pharmaceutical strategy, the HTA regulation, and actually, if we get it right, this is a model that can be implemented, and if you want, enlarged and exported in order to secure a patient with the best outcomes. Now, I want to remind you also another couple of data. So first of all, I do not know if I'm not sure it has been already said. In 2020, in the European Union, we had almost 3 million of new 3 million of new cancer diagnoses. And if we want to tackle cancer, if we want to tackle cancer, we need to understand how to implement in our strategy diagnostics. And as Ben said, there are different types of diagnostics. We do not need to focus only on a specific sector, because actually, if we want to get it right and if we want to tackle cancer, we need to develop the right policy for preventing cancer, for making an early diagnosis, and also to ensure the right treatment, as Tanya was saying, at the right time. So it's a continuum of care, and the role of the diagnostic, whatever they will be, because they may have different role in the different phase of tackling the continuum of cancer, is something that we need to keep in mind. The ESMO blueprint to tackle cancer, as I say, spanning from the development of policy from prevention to early diagnosis, treatment in the sense of offering the optimal care to patients. And of course, it's really important with respect to the precision oncology and also the supporting of survivorship. And in order to do that, and this has been already hinted and alluded, we need a robust, evolving regulatory and policy environment, also an environment that will facilitate clinical research, for instance, with the new clinical trial regulation that is going to be implemented in next January, on the 31st January 2022, and also the GDPR and the intertwining between the two of them. Now, let me conclude with one important point that actually is related to what Tanya said about the disparities in access not only to treatment, but also to diagnostics and genomic tests all over Europe and within the same country. this is exactly the reason. I mean, everybody's trying to mobilitate to get mapping the availability of these diagnostics, and this is the exact reason why ESMO has launched, and it's on the verge of examining this data, a large survey to interrogate the 27 EU countries of the European Union about the availability of genomic tests, because actually we really need, first of all, to understand how is the prevalence and the penetrance of these tests in the European community, in order to get the granularity and of what is missing, where is missing, and how to improve the access to these genomic tests. And so on the same line of research that we've done in the past in terms of availability to cancer medicine, this is now the time to understand which is the availability to genomic tests in order to refine, to tailor the treatment for patients. I think I'll stop here, and I'm looking forward to.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Well, at the beginning of this panel, I did ask the audience, in which areas of cancer care do you think advanced diagnostics will have the greatest positive impact? And as you can see there, the vast number of people said choosing the right clinical pathway for the right patient. A smaller number said providing information about treatment and choices and disease prognosis to patients, their families and carers. A reasonable number, about a third, thought that equipping healthcare systems, healthcare professionals and payers with the right information for better decision-making was where it would have the biggest impact. No one thought it was going to be about helping directing future areas of research. Perhaps we can take from that the areas of research and clinical trial design are already well developed. But I'm really interested to get your opinion on those results. So let me ask you, Benjamin, are you surprised or would you have agreed with those sorts of results?
Tough question. So I think I broadly agree with those results. I think in terms of my opening remarks was around definitions, and I think in terms of when people have a clear understanding of the type of diagnostic and technology and what its place is in the clinical pathway, then you get to a clear understanding of the situation. So, and we have a lot of recent experience in the advanced lung cancer pathways across different countries in Europe, where we've been running studies. And I'll just simply say where we compare our technologies with the current standard of tissue biopsy care, there are some pretty significant differences in results, and basically we're able to identify more patients eligible for treatment far quicker, and with these patients who are in an advanced setting, that's very meaningful. And the challenge then is to how do we translate that into a dialogue with the payers. And I think the other areas, I mentioned the innovation life cycle, and we really, we're looking forward and quite excited about the Commission proposal that's close to adoption. And all I'll simply say is this: if I think about again what we're developing now in our labs in the US and would like to bring to Europe, is we have a test which was developed originally to screen solid tumors for 55 genes. A few years ago, it's currently indicated in 74 genes in Europe, and soon and we would like to bring a technology, but that's right in the middle of this IVDR transition phase, where you have a much broader panel with very complex genomic signatures, and the question is, how do we bring that to Europe, given the challenging frameworks that we have ahead of us? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tanya. I also want to bring you in. I mean, we're here. These are the results. We've got this: getting the right clinical pathway for the right patient. Do you think there's a sense that there's a communication mismatch as well, in that maybe not every patient knows that they can ask for these sorts of technological developments and advances to be used in their case? I mean, how much of this onus is about letting people know what the possibilities are?
Yeah, well, definitely this is important to have the right information. well, most of the patients probably expect from their physicians to share this information with them. But I think that more and more we see that patients come to their doctors and ask for the right treatment. And if I look to these results today, probably a lot of patients are listening to us and following this meeting because they expect to get the right pathway, clinical pathway, and the treatment from their diagnostic procedures, which is the right way to go. Yeah.
Thank you. I should say this is a very unscientific poll that we've just conducted here, but it gives us an idea of what our audience thinks. Anna, Eva, your thoughts as well. Nobody here has voted for development of new therapies or new future areas of research. Do you think that's because we are already quite developed in that area, or do you feel like people are still focusing on cure rather than prevention?
Thank you. Well, I wanted to comment as well on the question of unequal access, actually, where we heard a lot of concerns about different access in different countries and so on. And I wanted, because I was thinking there that I do think that the HTA regulation can play a very important role in terms of allowing all the member states to have access to the same clinical data and take an informed decision for the pricing and reimbursement. And I do think as well that it's important that the patients are involved in this. As mentioned, the patients would like to have access to this data as well. And in order to get closer, we will not get into the pricing and reimbursement decisions because there is this national competence. But I think that it also provides a tool for cooperating on also on the economic evaluations, actually, both in the framework of the HTA regulation and also in the pharma strategy that supports collaboration on these aspects as well. So that's what I wanted to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosa, your thoughts as well on what you think about these results.
So first of all, I really like the point that you mentioned, the clinical pathway, because we really need to keep in mind that these also, talking of diagnostic tests and everything, it's not just one time, one go, okay? Cancer is a smart system, is a plastic system, learns how to bypass the hurdles that, we try to put. So it's not, it is important to take into account that this is a repeated access to the right diagnostics that we need. So I really like the concept of the clinical pathway because it's not just one intervention. And I think that this concept of the pathway, clinical pathway, should be embedded into the discussion with regulators, the HTA assessment agency, payers, because it's not just in some people's mind, it's still just one test, one go, and it's done. But this is not the case. So we really need to be aware about the repeating the test. And I think that this is actually what I want to comment about this answer.
Thank you. I want a brief word before we wrap up, because time has flown, on portability of individual medical data, that transfer those cross-border patients, as it were. Is there enough being done to join up between the different healthcare systems? I mean, particularly in advanced diagnostics, having the same sort of health data presented in the same way for an individual across borders is very important. And we struggle with that even with foundational medicine at the moment. Anna, what do you think? How do you think we are advanced in that area? Is there more that can be done?
Thank you very much. I do think a lot more can be done. I mean, we are already working on changing health data and so on, but I think we heard from this debate, and we have heard it before, that there is a lot of, it's difficult to compare data. We have different data sets in different countries. We have different registers in different countries. And this is, of course, complicating the possibility of collaboration and so on. So I do think that we can do a lot more. We are working, as you know, on the European Health Data Space in the Commission. I think that this is a very important initiative that will help us and allow us to better exchange this type of data.
Well, thank you. A sort of general question I'd also like to get everyone's response on before we wrap up, which is how the EU Cancer Plan can facilitate integrating advanced diagnostics into clinical practice, regular clinical practice at a national level as a matter of form rather than an add-on or an adjunct or a nice to have. Rosa, what are your feelings on that? Is there anything that you pinpoint as being key?
No, I think it's the reason why, as an oncology community, we welcome the Beating Cancer Plan is that it actually, put a stronger accent, a stronger attention to the concept of precision oncology, precision medicine, which means to deliver the right intervention using the best diagnostic that allows us to do so. Now, it is difficult. It's not that just because we have a plan, from tomorrow morning, everything will be different. We know that, but it's already something that we have, the plan, the HTA regulation. So there is this eagerness or this push, if you want. It depends on how we look at it, to try to have, some kind of common conversation and understanding what can be mitigated, what can be aligned. Because actually, after all, this is, as I say, cancer, from a medical point of view, cancer is a global problem, and it needs to have a global approach and global solution. The problem is, of course, is represented by different healthcare system, by different reimbursement system. But I think that with the type of conversation that has started with all these initiatives at the European level, we actually can move these things forward.
Benjamin, the same question to you. What would you like to see done to bring that sort of facilitate advanced diagnostics as the norm?
I think I would build on the comments that Rosa just made. Is firstly, we really welcome the Beating Cancer Plan and the work programs or the thematic programs within that. I think it's this sector is, if I'm just talking here from a company perspective, but it's still a relatively small sector, and I think we would support greater dialogue in this space. So where the Commission and the community can support a dialogue around comprehension of diagnostic technologies, that will be hugely valuable. And I'm not saying that we need to have an equal place to the level of investment that falls or sits behind therapeutics or treatments. But I do think there should be there can be some greater investment in the dialogue part and the exchange between the communities specific to diagnostics across the research, clinical development, regulatory and reimbursement pieces.
Well, I was actually just to follow up quickly, Benjamin, was that because it was lowest on our unscientific poll, what level does that dialogue need to happen at? Does that need to start at research point or is it at a development stage?
I would say so. I'm not sure whether that poll is so representative as so much of the work that we're involved in is to facilitate clinical research, but I think the dialogue should initiate at this level with this community, and the community can we can define collectively, do we want to focus that dialogue in the earlier research phases or more in terms of the adoption in a country within the clinical pathways. I think so. I can't determine whether. I think simply having that platform, and if that were to be facilitated by the Commission or other organisations, that will be a really great initiative to take forward over the next few years as the cancer plan is rolled out.
Well, thank you very much, Benjamin. And Tanya, I'll let you have a final word before I hear from Anna to wrap up this panel.
Yes, thank you. I can definitely agree with all that was said before me, but also I think that this new techniques and all the diagnostic procedures should get and should be a part of European Beating Cancer Plan, and then implement this on national levels, which will be quite a big challenge. But I think that if we all work together, a lot of things is possible.
Thank you very much. Anna, your final thoughts on that question. What is there in the existing EU cancer plan that could really help to facilitate this at a member state level?
Well, I do think that all the components of the cancer plan would need to work together. And also, I think that this discussion clearly showed that we have so many different pieces of legislations that are either in place already or that are being developed now. And we really need to see the synergies and the interactions between all of that. And as speakers have said before me, I also think that we really need to work very closely together with all the different actors being involved in the entire process of the cancer diagnostics until treatment. And this is the only way that we can make some progress. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's still quite a lot of work to be done, but I think we're headed in the right direction. This is the message I'm hearing from you there, Anna. Thank you to all the panelists for this panel. We're going to take a short break, but don't go away. We will be back in just a few moments with panel 2 talking about striking the balance. For staying with us, and welcome back to our second panel this afternoon. And we're going to be talking about striking the right balance between foundational and increased personalized treatments in cancer care. Now, that last panel, we focused about whether or not advanced diagnostics were available at the same level across the EU. I think the general consensus there was that there's not the same level in every EU member state, and of course that poses its own difficulties in trying to get something done at EU level, because health is a national competency, as we heard from the European Commission. But we can bear in mind a lot of those thoughts as we go forward now into panel 2. But as before, I want to get you, the audience, involved again. So please do remember, you can go to Slido, and we want you to answer this time the question, where do you see the biggest challenges for the wider adoption of personalized therapies in cancer care? Sort of moving on from our last question. The last time we asked, where do you think they will have the biggest impact? And here we're asking, where are those barriers or challenges? The options are regulatory frameworks that are not suited for supporting timely introduction, or a lack of patient pathways for accessing personalized therapies, unequal reimbursement of personalized therapies, we touched on that in the last panel as well, or a lack of systems for digital health data collection and sharing, for example, suboptimal real-world data collection and data on patient outcomes. We will leave that poll open for you. You can join it there using the QR code or entering the hashtag CancerConferenceEU at slido.com. There's also a Q&A section there. We're going to leave that open. If you have any burning questions that you want answered, pop them in there. Although I do remind you, time is, of course, very tight. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to our panel. We have Antonella Cardone, who is the director for the European Cancer Patient Coalition. Joining her, we have Peter Liese, MEP and EPP spokesman for health. Dr. Celia Scott is the global head of precision oncology at Novartis, and staying with us from the last panel, Rosa Giuliani, director of public policy at the European Society for Medical Oncology. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Antonella, the floor is yours. Give us your opening thoughts on how we create the right balance.
So good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank EUCOPE and BPI for the invitation to contribute to the discussion on the need to balance between traditional treatments and personalized treatments in cancer care. So I am the director of ECPZ, which is the European Cancer Patient Coalition, the largest cancer patient umbrella organization in Europe, with over 450 members in 50 countries globally. And we work for a Europe of equality, where all Europeans with cancer have timely and affordable access to the best treatment and care available throughout their life. This is part of our mission, and this introduction is important to set the scene for what I'm going to address today. So let me start by saying that the pandemic has severely disrupted cancer treatment and care in the EU, and therefore now more than ever, it is time to address in an efficient manner all the existing challenges on healthcare. So one way to address them is through personalized treatments. In fact, healthcare is increasingly moving towards personalized approaches. We are now living a pivotal moment in healthcare, and more specifically in patient care, with medical knowledge, data and technology combined to offer the best outcome possible to patients. Personalized medicine in cancer care is already changing outcomes by helping patients live longer and have a better life, making sure that each patient preferences and experiences are considered. Not every patient with cancer responds to treatments in the same way. What works for one person may not work for another, and some may suffer serious side effects from treatment that is also ineffective. Now, thanks to breakthrough technological advances, it is becoming possible to treat people with cancer based on who they are, not where their cancer is located. So improved treatment and quality of care means fewer side effects and distress, as well as faster access for people with cancer to new and more effective treatment options, on all of which improve the quality of life for people with cancer. Even though these targeted approaches exist and have marked a new era, still not everyone has access to them, and major disparities exist in Europe. So for instance, biomarker testing is a crucial pillar of precision medicine, promising superior treatment outcomes for all cancer patients. Yet, current access to high-quality oncology biomarker testing is inconsistent across the countries in EU. And while there has been considerable progress in biomarker testing, key barriers stand in the way of more widespread biomarker testing adoption. At ECPZ, we are working a lot on this. We have been a part of a recent study carried out with the EFPIA and IQN-PATH on mapping the accessibility of biomarker testing across Europe. We have also developed a survey with more than 2,000 patients. And the result is that there are huge inequalities across Europe, with the north of Europe being more advanced and the Eastern Europe in need of structural reforms to reach similar levels of accessibility as in Northern Europe. So some of the barriers or obstacles identified include, and these were also mentioned in the question that was in the poll before. So delays in regulatory and reimbursement approval, lack of testing and laboratory infrastructure, unclear value assessment and public budget, inefficient awareness and education, and no coordinated data collection across Europe. So what is more, there is a major gap between countries during the development of a treatment. More specifically, there is a notable gap between pre-approval development of anti-cancer medicines and their post-registration using clinical practice. So with academics and research on one side and industry and clinicians on the other, any gap in the transfer of evidence-based knowledge can and will affect optimal implementation. Therefore, we need to ensure that screening, diagnosis, treatment, and even prevention of the disease are targeted, ensuring the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. Because not all cancers can be treated through personalized medicine, and we need to find the right balance between traditional and personalized medicine. We need governments to ensure the means to identify people who may benefit from more effective targeted cancer treatment and avoid treatment-related toxicity where possible, all while helping to ensure the sustainability of our healthcare systems. So one way to address this is with the molecular tumor testing or biomarker testing and personalized medicine, a targeted approach to the prevention, diagnosis, and the treatment of cancer. Furthermore, personalized medicine is at the heart of Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, as we heard from the previous panel. This plan also aims at diverting the current trend of cancer becoming the leading cause of death in the EU if we do not act immediately. So the plan clearly recognizes the value of personalized medicine, a theme which cuts across many of the initiatives it proposes to introduce. So personalized medicine requires adequate resources, multidisciplinary expertise, access to large, high-quality data sets, including patient records, suitable analysis tools, and coordinated collaborative projects. At ECPC, we have also developed a personalized medicine booklet to address the opportunities and challenges that personalized medicine provides so that the needs of cancer patients across Europe are met. One size fits all is no longer valid. Personalized medicine aims to delivering the right treatment at the right time with the right dose for patients to achieve better outcomes while preserving their quality of life. Moreover, and to conclude, more follow-up with patients on their experiences with cancer treatment is also relevant, and that this data can be used to pinpoint what needs to be changed. Therefore, more patient-centric information and guidance are crucial. So thank you for now, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Antonella. Peter, let me ask you, what do you think we need to do to strike the right balance between foundational or traditional medicine and the increasingly personalized care we see?
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a crucial time now. You know that I personally and we as EPP work for more than 4 years now on cancer, how we can better address this problem that it's hitting all of us directly or indirectly. At least we all know somebody who suffers from cancer or has even died from cancer. And we are now achieving the crucial part of our work in the BECA committee. We had the deadline for amendments last week, and this week it's the first debate on the amendments, and we are approaching the final vote the beginning of December, with a lot of meetings also with our rapporteur, Véronique Trillet-Lenoir, and the shadow rapporteurs. I have the privilege to be the shadow rapporteur for the EPP, and any concrete input is welcome, because what is our duty as European Parliament and European institutions in a whole is that we really make a change. So not give recommendations or raise some ideas what member states or whoever could do, but we can even address European legislation, and we can also create structures. So last week I was in a conference on pediatric cancer, and we want to have a permanent structure addressing pediatric cancer. That's also in the draft report of Véronique Trillet-Lenoir. And I would like to quote Jean Monnet here, because he values the importance of human beings, but also to have permanent structures where we work together in Europe, and that we should also use. Why does Europe have to act? I think it's very clear that many issues can be addressed at national level. And unfortunately, or I don't know, it's a fact. If we say unfortunately or fortunately, there are many decisions to be made at local level, regional level, and national level. But there are challenges that we cannot address at national level. This is true, what I mentioned with children. Pediatric cancer needs to be addressed at European level because the figures are so low that it cannot be addressed at national level sufficiently. And the same applies to rare cancers. And personalized medicine is now, turning very frequent cancers into rare cancers. Because if you have subgroups of patients, then that you treat differently, then each subgroup is quite small. And on the other hand, I fully agree with Antonella that personalized medicine has a huge advantage when it comes to effectiveness of the medicine and less side effects. And that's why we need to do whatever we can to make life of those people that are working on personalized medicine, like on rare cancer, like on pediatric cancer, as easy as possible. I said it in several occasions. We need to have a red carpet for everybody who wants to work cross-border. That is crucial for personalized medicine, and we should make it as easy as possible. Many scientists reported in our BECA committee that they have a lot of hurdles, stumbling blocks, and those should be put away. And when I speak about structures, not only about pediatric medicine, what we suggest as EPP Group is a special envoy directly reporting to the president of the commission. And all the problems that scientists and especially SMEs have, UCOPE and BPI are representing more the SME part of pharmaceutical industry. For them, it's more difficult to work cross-border if the rules are too complicated on data protection, on clinical trials, and many, many other issues. That's why this special envoy should help to avoid the obstacles. And then I think we can make sufficient progress to better address cancer and to have better treatment with less side effects. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Cecilia, let me come to you and get the perspective from Novartis. We talked there about balancing and what are the challenges in striking a balance. Presumably cost, there are barriers in terms of cost, there are barriers in terms of patients' acceptability, there's barriers in terms of access to data. How do you view this issue as a whole?
So thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to be here. And I want to kind of catch a little bit on from the previous panel where the discussion was around research. And the precision medicine, I think we've heard now, is really a reality in oncology. It's an integral part of the drug development and treatment delivery to patients. We know it kind of shortens the drug development timeline, increases the probability of success in clinical trials, and bring efficiency to the society as a whole. The access to the drug and diagnostic is very interesting, and it keeps coming up throughout the last hour and a half. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is really the urgency to test. So we talk a lot about having access to tests, but it's really creating the urgency to test the patient really early, and the diagnosis wouldn't be completed without the biomarker testing information to really inform the patient treatment. For patient treatment, we talk a lot about targeted therapies or non-targeted therapies. And I think that's another piece that we have some expectations from a patient and from a clinician that we need to manage. That if you have your biomarker testing, you are expected to match the biomarker with a specific treatment. But not having the match is not necessarily a bad thing, because having that information and giving the best choice to treatment, even if it's not a target therapy, it is the right drug for the right patient at the right time. From a pharmaceutical perspective, from a Novartis perspective, we're looking into what we discuss here, which is really this building the partnerships across stakeholders, which is kind of what we see in forums like this. It's really bringing everybody together to remove the barriers on the drug approval, on the reimbursement, testing adoption, we talk about educational efforts, we talk about guidelines. And Europe is uniquely positioned to really deliver that partnership through consortiums, through networks, and forums just like this.
Sorry, thank you very much, Cecilia. I think you're right in terms of highlighting the possibilities in our discussions today. But Rosa, let me have your perspective. We heard from you on the last panel. Try and deal very specifically with the question we have here on panel 2.
So I think, so once again, thank you for the invitation. I'm really enjoying and learning a lot. And there is this lovely discussion that I found really useful. As I say, I'm representing the oncology community, the European Society for Medical Oncology as the leader professional organization for medical oncology in Europe and worldwide. And I think that we need to get our expectation right, okay? So when you asked before what is dictating the implementation of precision medicine, and so the uptake of diagnostics, I think it's there are different factors, cost, reimbursement, whatever you mentioned. But the first and foremost, the most important is the biology and the science, so research. And I think we should start really from design and implementing the right trials, the right pathway for the implementation, then for the streamlined implementation of precision oncology. Every patient, when I'm discussing with patient chemotherapy, because maybe there is not a specific target, because we cannot have a genomic test or whatever, the patient is simply asking, why my neighbors, he has such fancy drug, and I want, why are you so nasty to me, and you're just treating with chemotherapy? And there are multiple explanations for that, because in some cases we just simply do not know the biology. So still we need to rely on, the whole foundational treatment, as you call it, which basically means chemotherapy. And once again, there is a problem also of literacy, because sometimes I have patients that come to me with the results of very interesting genomic tests that I, despite my involvement in all these interactions, I struggle to understand, because maybe there is not just one mutation, because I do not know which is the most relevant mutation. So I think that fully acknowledging all the statements and the interest, and of course everybody loves the concept of doing the right thing for the right patient at the right time. I think this is going to be really complicated. We need to set our expectation at the right level, and we need to have the inclusion of all stakeholders in the development of a research program from the very beginning of the inception of this program. And this includes patients, and this includes healthcare professionals, and a collaboration between all of us.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and indeed all your panelists there for your opening statements. Let's have a look now at what the audience thought in that poll that we asked. I can see it was much more together, if you like. There was a lot less discrepancies between the answers than we saw in the first poll. So the lack of systems for digital health data collection and sharing seems to be the biggest challenge, viewed by 45% of people, but regulatory frameworks that are not suitable for supporting personalized therapies was 36%. And then these last two, I think, are possibly very linked: lack of patient pathways and lack or unequal reimbursement of personalized therapies across member states, both with 27%. So a lot of different challenges, and people focusing on very different challenges rather than in terms of seeing a particular vision for where it could be successful, as we saw in the last poll. And of course, I should stress, this is an entirely unscientific poll. We're just asking our audience what they think. Antonella, what's your reaction to that? I mean, I think it says to me that people see lots of challenges. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Well, starting from the challenge that was perceived as the biggest barrier, the lack of data. I mean, that is definitely an issue, and I understand probably why the audience has voted for that, as there is now there are huge gaps in Europe when it comes to collecting, managing data, digital data. I mean, you know, artificial intelligence, precision medicine is linked to that. There is, it's the future. But in Europe, there is the data are not as structured as they could be, and the utilization is not at the optimum. And this is often a barrier also for patients to be part of, for patients to allow having their data collected. Then also when it comes to lack of patient pathways for accessing personalized therapies, this is very important, and it's also very important to me as I mean, in representation of cancer patients, as you know, there is no homogeneity across Europe and even within the same country or within the same region. So it's really depending on the individual hospital, most likely to set up an ad hoc patient pathway. So I think. That's all. I would also like to comment very briefly on what was said before by the other panelists, and that is that, you know, of course we must look for the right balance, but then on the other side, precision medicine is a hope for us patients. So this is why we are trying to push as much as possible personalized medicine as one of the biggest innovation for cancer patients. And you know, we understand that not everything can be cured, not all cancers can be cured through personalized medicine, and biomarker testing is not the panacea of all cancers, but still it's the innovation we hope for.
Thank you, Antonella. You've covered a lot of ground there, as I hoped you would, because it's quite a lot to get into just 45 minutes. Cecilia, can I ask for your reaction to that poll? As I say, it's just a guideline for what our audience is thinking, but is there any one of those that you would have chosen as your response?
Yeah, you know, it's a really good question, because I was just looking at that, and I think I was into the patient pathways. I'm really looking into that. I think if I go top down, I think the regulatory frameworks, it's evolving, and I think we're learning with that, because as we understand better molecular mechanism of disease, we bring innovation that the other panelists kind of brought in, and to continue to engage with the regulators to understand how to incorporate that and provide safe and efficacious drugs. So it makes sense to me. The reimbursement, we've already talked about that. It's really across global. I think we heard before that cancer it's a global disease. And the pathways is really understanding is the education of it's multifactorial, right? You have multiple stakeholders. You have the clinician, you have the patient, you have the payer, you have the caregivers, right? That are all putting together to really understand the personalized therapies and the benefits that it brings in. And I think it really takes all of us to make that needle move, you know, together, because it's really not one responsibility, but a joint responsibility. Where we can make a difference. So I'm not commenting on the data, because Antonella did a great job. So I'm not going to repeat what she already said.
Thank you very much. Peter, if we have you still there, I can't see you, but I suspect you're still tuned in. What do you think about the response there we see from our audience members?
Yeah, in fact, I'm here. Hopefully you see and hear me. Great. So, yeah. Unequal reimbursement of personalized therapies across member states. I understand it's a challenge for those that offer these therapies, but it's clear that what to reimburse will be a decision of the member states also for the long run. We will help to improve the situation when we implement HTA, and that was a big success that cancer will be one of those indications where HTA is implemented first. And then at least we have a European assessment. So that means that there is a European analysis how much the new product will in fact help, and if it's really prolonging life, if it's reducing side effects, that there will be a common analysis, and that will help to make the case during the member states. But we shouldn't overestimate the European power here. It's to make this transparent, to give a good tool, and to avoid double working, or not double, 27 times the same analysis in same member state, in different member states. So that's a success, and cancer is to be implemented fast, but don't overestimate this. The two answers that have been given the most support, regulatory framework and the lack of system of digital health data collection and sharing, I think that are the key points also for me. Here we have a European competence. Everything that is cross-border, we need to address. And I think we need to look at the legal base and the tools to implement, and as I mentioned, on the structure, permanent dialogue, having this special envoy in the European Commission that collects all the problems and works on solutions with all the people responsible, and the lack of systems for digital health data collection and sharing has definitely a clear link with the data protection, the general data protection regulation, and we need to be much better. I'm not sure that we have to change the regulation. If needed, I'm very much in favor. There may be other points where we can even improve the text, but that takes time. Maybe guidelines and a more common approach of the member states in implementing the regulation will help in this point.
Thank you, Peter. Rosa, a slightly different question to you, because I can see that it's a question that's come in from our audience member. It's a very, very broad question, but it's: in what way should the EU continue to encourage the development and research of foundational therapies?
I think that we really need to understand once again research and to understand better the biology of cancer. Okay, so it's not that in some cases foundational therapies, so treatment that we use so far, are still perfectly fine. We really need to understand which is the behavior of cancer, and we really need to avoid to create chaos. So we really need to approach this topic in a very rational way. What I mean is that, once again, it's very difficult that cancer, whatever is the cancer type that you want to take into account, will have just one actionable mutation, and this will be the same forever. Okay. And we should understand what is going on during the cancer history of the patient, and that's why we need to have a rational approach. For instance, in prioritizing the actionable mutation and offering treatment for the actionable mutation that are going to be the real driver of the disease. And in order to do that, we need a discussion, as I say, in the medical community, in the scientific community, discussion with the input of all different stakeholders, and to develop specific tools. I'm just quoting, for instance, the ESMO scale for the actionability of the molecular targets, the XCAT scale, but actually may be a really important guide to let us know what is appropriate to target at the very specific time in a cancer history. So I think that we really need to, I'm afraid that if we start, testing just for the sake of testing and just discarding treatment, just because it's an old treatment, we are adding chaos to what we already know. So we need to proceed with a very rationalized approach, developing tools and develop research to clarify the unknown areas.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Now we have just 2 minutes left, so that's 30 seconds each if we do the math. I would like each of you to sum up, I know, in as quickly a way as possible. What would be your one phrase or your one word or one call to a health authority trying to make, if you like, the business case to put out extra funding for these increasingly personalized treatments or advanced diagnostics? What would your one word phrase be, Antonella?
Well, I would say that this is the most, not only one of the most effective ways to treat cancer, but it is definitely one of the most efficient ways to treat cancer, not only for the health system, but also for the cancer patient, the family, the carers. So it's, as I said before, it's the future where we look at with hope.
Thank you. And Peter, what is your thoughts? How would you try and make the business case for health authorities?
So, when it comes to cancer in general, but especially when it comes to personalized medicine, Europe will not be able to beat cancer alone. But without European cooperation, we will not make it. And that's why it's so important, especially in this field.
Thank you very much. Rosa, your thoughts?
Sorry, I risk to be boring, but I think that I really want to appeal for a rational approach, a systematic approach, because this is clearly the right way to go, but we need to get it right. So we need to have an inclusive approach with a stronger vocation for research, which includes the definition of the, how to better tailor treatment. And I think that this can be done if we approach the problem rationally, as I mentioned before.
Thank you. And Cecilia, how would you make the formal argument for advanced therapies and personalized medicine? Yeah. If indeed it does cost extra, how do you make that?
Well, I think what you're looking really is the probability of success, not just in the clinical, looking what Rosa just said, making the rational approach, but actually giving the patients a better chance for the best treatment they're going to have. And that actually impacts the society as a whole, because, you're just going to be much more targeted to the patient treatment overall, and benefiting everyone at the end, our society and the healthcare system as well.
Well, thank you very much for all your comments and your thoughts. I really do appreciate it. I'm just keeping an eye. We have no more questions in from our audience. So I think unless somebody writes in remarkably quickly, we're going to leave it there. I must say, I really appreciate the speed with which you wrapped up and the difficulty and complexity of this topic. So I think it's a great credit to all of the panelists on this panel and of course on the previous panel as well. And I know indeed that this is not by any means the end of the conversation. It will continue to run and run on various other discussion forums, but also on social media. So please do keep sharing and tagging in our organizers as well as the organizations of all those who have been speaking today. Thank you, audience members, for your giving your results in the poll statement. So don't go away because we are not completely finished. We will have a closing remarks from Dr. Kai Joachimsen, who's the BPI Director General, coming up in just a few minutes.
I would like to thank all the panelists for their contribution and the important discussion here today. With its European Beating Cancer Plan, the European Commission has paved the way to a better future for cancer patients and their families and loved ones. However, we've heard in the discussions that there's still a lot that needs to be done, some gaps to be filled, and some obstacles to overcome. We all know that there is a lot of work ahead of us to provide every single cancer patient with a treatment that is best suited to their condition. This brings me to an important point. The patients must be at the center of the strategy, and we need to ensure we have the broadest range of care available today. Especially with regards to cancer, every patient's situation is unique, and just with the broad spectrum of therapies available, we can cater to their needs. And this is what today's conference was all about, to stress that only a well-functioning ecosystem will be capable to this mix of advanced diagnostics and therapies to deliver both personalized and foundational goals. Only then we can achieve the goals. Then, secondly, delivering the best treatment available for cancer patients across Europe. And then we need to foster and ensure an environment that allows for research and development in these areas. With regard to therapies, we need a research environment that enables innovation and at the same time acknowledges the benefits that repurposing can bring to cancer patients. Looking ahead, in addition to the cancer plan, the revision of the EU pharmaceutical legislation will play a crucial role in supporting these technologies. We should use this chance to future-proof our systems and to further strengthen research and development. The initiatives envisioned in the cancer plan and the revision of the legislation should go hand in hand and should be deeply intertwined. Another key factor to success will be supporting the member states in the implementation of their national plans to ensure the biggest alignment possible. And not only is the cooperation between the European and the national level of utmost importance, this cooperation is needed by all stakeholders involved and must include the industry as well. This includes, for example, and we heard it before, the EU network linking comprehensive cancer centers, where we should examine how we as an industry can contribute to their success as well. We have a lot to do. Let's get it done. Thank you.